On that note, as we've talked a little bit about living in situations and opportunities, again, what I really come down to is it boils down to how do we start thinking as parents? How do we start trying to have the system work a little bit for us and get the people around us that can help us create the models that we want to have the most amount of success with our children. And it's scary. I mean, I know the emotions that I went through as a father, and like Bob said, is that, trying to look at different things, and yet that fear, because we fight hard for our kids, we're protective of our kids as they become adults, and I've been very blessed with the standpoint that I've been very fortunate to meet literally hundreds of families over the course of the last 16 years in being involved with support groups and being involved with Regional Center and being involved with meeting people such as Bob and Karen, who's coming up next, that it's a process, it's a path that we have to take, and I think that we as families are also the greatest source of underground information out there, because the system doesn't always line up and say, hey, here's the menu, why don't you pick your program. It just doesn't operate that way, and it's, all the different working parts that go on with it is, as Bob mentioned earlier, that, do things parallel? No, sometimes you got to have a coordination of a lot of different things to make things actually happen. But the dream starts with us. The dreams and the hopes start with us, and how do we, again, let the system try to do the best that we can. It's time that we, start talking to our caseworkers about the things that we want to have for our children, and how do we put those pieces together and let them come to work for us. And speaking of work, our next speaker is Karen Jones, who is the Executive Director of Pomona Valley, PVW, and I've been very blessed to have been affiliated myself with PVW since 1998. Mr. Duffield, who's sitting in our audience and talking about being the oldest person here, he'd invited me to a meeting 15 years ago that I thought I was just going to listen to a meeting. Little did I know that I was going to be elected to the board that night in serving on the board with PVW. For me, it's been a very large blessing. PVW employs almost 350 adults with special needs, and so for me, it's been a huge blessing to watch the growth that I've seen of this organization over the last 15 years, the leadership that Karen has had, but for the most part, allowing me to see that there are options within the employment world. We don't have to get stuck and pigeonholed into different thought process, and I always took the perspective of everybody should be employed, and a lot of times it's just not as possible as we would like for it to be, but that doesn't mean that we're going to stop looking for options as we go through it. And as one of my friends once said to me, and I'll go back to even a story with James, when James was 4 years old, and I can't remember whether it was a physical therapist or an occupational therapist, as James was building these blocks and then turning around and knocking them down. And she says, well, James, you can't do that because it's not going to be acceptable when you go to work in a workshop. And I'm kind of, wait a minute. My kid's 4 years old. You already have him pre-programmed as to what his life's going to look like down the road. And she made a statement to me that was very prevalent, and one that I got to understand over the course of time. And she says, Grady, she says, you give me a child with the least amount of abilities. If I get good behavior, I can get that child employed. She says, but you give me somebody with behavior issues, until those behaviors are going to be modified, it's going to be very, very difficult to let it happen. And even though I didn't like the harshness of the prediction of what my child was, or what she felt my child was going to do, she helped me understand a little bit differently than I would have in my own pre-programmed brain. And so again, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Karen from PVW, a person that I admire greatly and humongously, and I think she's done a great job for our adults within the community, politically, within the programs that we see. Also serves a lot of time within the regional centers on different vendor advisory committees. A lady who's just, I think, is just phenomenal and in tune with a lot of things that are out there for our adults. Karen?
All right, Grady. Thank you so much. And are you guys getting tired of sitting? You want to stand up and turn around? And I apologize, I'm going to kind of stand in your way a little bit because I have some point that I'm going to be sharing with you today regarding employment. There was a parent that I met not too long ago who was talking about navigating the whole regional center system and how frustrating it was and how it was absolutely making her crazy. And it is tough, you guys, and I recognize that. So she decided to go see her psychiatrist, and she walked in and he said, "What exactly is the problem?" She goes, "This regional center system has me so crazy. I just don't know who I am anymore. I'm a camper, I'm a RV, I'm a camper, I'm a RV, I'm a camper, I'm a RV." The psychiatrist said, "Calm down, you're too tense." It is extremely frustrating, guys, and we recognize that. So I'm the executive director of PVW. We serve on an annual basis about 400 people, on a daily basis about 340 to 350 every single day, and that's in a variety of settings, both in the world of employment and the world of day programs. What I want to clarify right off the bat is when you heard Carol Fitzgibbons talking this morning, you never heard her say the word employment, did you? She talked about going to a day program. Let me explain why that is. The whole world of employment used to be run through the state of California through the Department of Rehabilitation, and about 2006 that all transitioned over to another state department that oversees the regional centers. And when those regulations got transferred over, employment was called a day program. That makes me crazy. It is not a day program, it is employment. And there are a lot of different options for employment. You need to know that there's this whole spectrum of employment that I'm going to talk to you about today. So let's start just by talking about employment. It's a dream doesn't become reality through magic. It takes sweat, determination, and hard work. This is a quote by Colin Powell. When a person comes out of school without a disability, think back to when you came out of school without a disability. Did you go into your dream job? Probably not. I was a paper girl. I was riding a bicycle, delivering papers door to door, and then going and collecting door to door when the paper used to be delivered here in the afternoons. So when I got out of high school, that's what I was doing. That was far from my dream job. We have to remember that our kids, when they come out of high school, are not going to walk into their dream job either. It takes a lot of hard work, sweat, determination, not only by the child that's coming into the adult world, but also support from the family and others, significant people in their lives and in their circle of support. So what do we want? We want an employment goal, and what we want to do is maximize a couple of things. We want to maximize earning potential, and we want to maximize the employment options that are actually available out there. This should be for anyone with an intellectual disability. By the way, do you know that the state of California has just changed the law? Developmental disability is no longer in law. It is now called an intellectual disability. So for any of our kids that want to work who have an intellectual disability, these should be the things that we maximize. But the goal has to be individualized. One size does not fit all. And you know this from wherever your child is at in their progression in age right now. One size does not fit all. Your child is unique, your child is an individual, and we need to provide individualized services. But at the same time, we don't want to limit any strategy. So you have strategies that go from direct competitive employment all the way down to employment options that are very, very supported and maybe what we call segregated. But let me talk about segregation for just a minute. Segregation may or may not be a bad thing. If you have a group of janitors without disabilities that are working overnight, because that is the time when you clean office buildings, they are segregated. But we don't look at them as being segregated in the same way as we look at our sons and daughters being segregated in a work center or a work program. So we need to think about that word segregation a little bit and determine whether or not, what the meaning of that segregation really is. So while the paycheck obviously can be a very high motivator for all of us in employment, studies have shown that the paycheck is not always the most important thing that a job brings us. Jobs bring us increased independence, senses of accomplishment, greater self-esteem. You can read the list here. The one I want to focus on, though, is the second bullet from the bottom, invaluable social benefits, reducing loneliness and feelings of isolation. So whether this is out in competitive employment or in a site like a work program, this is one of the main things that I have seen over my 25 years of being so critical to employment, that it's not necessarily the paycheck, it's the social life that's actually developed and the reduction of isolation that a lot of the people feel when they come to work. So California has now passed, just this year, Assembly Bill 1041, and it's called the Employment First policy. In the state of California, Opportunities for integrated, competitive employment shall be given the highest priority for working age individuals regardless of the severity of the disability. That is what Employment First now says. Does that mean that everyone will be going into competitive employment? Absolutely not. But the regional center now has an obligation to talk to a person that's transitioning into the adult world about the policy in California that employment in an integrated and competitive job is going to be the highest priority. But the responsibility then is of the Regional Center Service Coordinator, or CSC, as Carol was referring to that person, and the service provider community is to try and help determine what is going to be the best fit and the best job match for that person. Direct competitive employment may not be the best option. And quite frankly, we're going to talk about what we call supported employment as an individual. What I've seen over the years is when a person goes from that social setting on-site in our work program into a competitive job as an individual placement, one of the biggest reasons for failure is loneliness and isolation. You can be in the community and not be part of the community. And that's the thing that we have to remember. So there are no secrets to success. It's the result of preparation, hard work, and learning from failure. Your kids are going to fail, guys. We don't want to set them up for failure, but they are going to fail. I don't believe there's anyone in this room who hasn't failed at something in their life. That is part of life. What we need to do is take those failures and learn from them. The service providers, though, are the people that are there put in place to try and look at the whole situation, to try and set up people so that they will not fail. But preparation is a really key part of this. So what does that include? Well, you have to have skill sets, right? You need to know the work rules and attitudes. You have to have consistent attendance, not be tardy. You have to have attention to task, willingness to learn new tasks, receptive to training and constructive criticism, and that's a really important one, and you have to be flexible. So these are the things that we as service providers in the adult world are trying to help prepare the kids that are coming out of school with by doing some other programs where we have school-age children actually come into our program while they're still in school so that they can get a chance to get some experience on the work floor, but also learn some of these really important work rules and attitudes. And then along with that, you've got to have safety skills. And, Grady talked about behaviors. Proper relationships with others is really key. There are not a whole lot of employers out there who will tolerate behavior that is not appropriate for the workplace. All the other things like motivation, grooming and hygiene, time management, money management, transportation skills. And a lot of times we use volunteer opportunities to build and strengthen those skills. And for those of you who have adult children that are coming into the adult world from school, I would really encourage you to get them involved in some volunteer activities because they can help develop some of these skills through volunteering. And a lot of high schools are actually requiring volunteering before kids graduate or get a certificate of completion. So transitioning to employment, the only place success comes before work is in the dictionary. We need to remember that. It does take a lot of hard work to get success. So here's some options that we can offer people in the adult world for employment. The first one is direct placement. Then we have competitive employment, or what we call supported employment individual placement. We have supported employment group. We have work programs, and we have adult development centers with a work component, and then there's also something out there called micro enterprise. These are pretty much the options within the regional center system for going to work. So let's talk about them one by one. First of all, direct placement. I think someone over here said, what do I do if my child is not eligible for the regional center? This is an option for those people. These are for non-eligible regional center clients. It's actually handled through the Department of Rehabilitation. Job development is provided, and what I mean by job development is sitting down with that person, learning about their skills, learning about their hopes and dreams, going through a very significant assessment with that person, which when PVW does this, it's actually a very thick book that we go through. We call it the Blue Book because we're so creative at PVW. But it has the person answer questions. It has significant people in their life answer questions. We actually do an interview with everyone involved in the circle of support, because what we're trying to do is not only assess the skills, but also talk about within the hopes and dreams that that person has, what would be a good job match. And then the job developer goes out and tries to develop that position. This does offer integration with non-disabled workforce. There is job coaching at the very beginning of the job, meaning we have a person who goes in with the person on the job to give them support on the job as a coach. But in this situation, it is very time limited and it will end. Sometimes it's only for the first 30 days, so just be aware of that. And it does rely heavily on what we call natural supports. That job developer and that job coach's job is to develop people within that business who are going to take this person under their wing and show them the ropes, communicate with them, eat lunch with them, make them feel included in the workforce. And those are called natural supports because they are not paid supports. And this person is hired and paid by the employer at minimum wage or higher. I'm going the wrong way. So competitive employment, or what we call supported employment individual placement, these individuals are regional center eligible clients. This is also initially funded by the Department of Rehabilitation. In the state of California, federal dollars are drawn down through our Medicaid waiver, but the only department for employment that draws down those dollars is the Department of Rehabilitation. So the person has to have a case opened with the Department of Rehabilitation in order to get placed on the job. They will stay with the Department of Rehabilitation through what we call stabilization, and then they will transition to the regional center funding and support. The regional center is there along the way, but they're not funding that initial portion. Again, this does offer job development and placement services. It does offer integration with non-disabled workforce. The initial job coaching in place will fade, but not to zero. It will fade to some portion of that work schedule. So over the first 6 months of the job, they may have 80% of the scheduled job coached, and at 6 months they may only have 20% of the scheduled job coached. These are for people who can be independent and don't have to have the level of supervision that some of our consumers need. It also needs to be somebody who is going to be on the job, and they're going to be able to conduct themselves in a manner that the employer expects them to while they're on the job. And these people are hired and paid by the employer at minimum wage or higher, and for some employers, tax credits might be available through the job opportunity tax credit. So there is an incentive for some employers to hire people in this situation. So these are just a couple of pictures to show you. We have one gentleman who's working over at Home Depot. He's actually driving the forklift over there. He's also working in the parking lot, loading up the cars and helping people carry out their stuff when they need help getting it loaded up. We have another gentleman working in an accounting office. We have someone working over at IKEA in their employee cafeteria doing some cooking. And then the third one here is at Doubletree by Hilton in Claremont doing the laundry. So these are just 4 of the examples that we have at PVW of what the individual placement might look like. Supported employment group is for folks who may need a little higher level of supervision. In supported employment group, you're working as a team of 3 to 8 individuals. That 3 to 8 is defined by the state of California. It cannot be a team of 2. It has to be at least 3. It cannot be a team of 9. It maxes out at 8. With this, again, you're having integration with non-disabled workforce, but you're going in as a team of people, not as an individual, and your job coach is going to be there 100% of the time while you're working. We do job development services. We may have a group of people who are all interested in something that's kind of relative to one another. And so if we find that group of people, we're going to go out and we're going to try and develop a job that that team could go out to. The individual is typically paid by the supported employment service provider, which would mean if it was from PVW, they would be on our payroll. And they're also typically paid by something called the Section 14C certificate. This is a productivity-based pay situation that is allowed by the federal government when they issue us this certificate called Section 14C. It is sub-minimum wage, but it's based on the individual productivity of the people that are in the group. So we have several people who are working at minimum wage or higher in groups because their productivity level allows them to do that. And I could go into another hour-long training just on the Section 14C certificate because it is very complicated and what the requirements are on the service provider to make sure that people are being paid fairly. But this is a situation where you may have someone who only works at 40% of the industrial standard when that person is measured. When you go out and try and find them a job in the community, there are not a lot of employers out there who are going to be willing to hire someone if they're only working less than half of the productivity rate of a person without a disability. So this offers an option where we can have people whose productivity is not as high go out as a group, and the employer does not actually hire them. We keep them on our payroll, but we also reduce a lot of the costs that the employer would have as far as recruitment and training and overhead and all work comp. That all stays on us. So it can be an attractive option for an employer so that we can have a group of people go out into the community and have the opportunity to develop relationships with other workers that don't have disabilities. And these are just a couple of samples that we have going on right now. We have a group working at DoubleTree that's doing portering services. We have a group working at the City of Chino Hills at their government center. And the three of them are down here. And on the top, he's doing his janitorial work up there at the City of Chino Hills. And then we have our own thrift store. So we have two groups that are actually running the thrift store with their job coach. It's their job to take care of it, and they do a fabulous job. And then we have a janitorial group that works not only on-site at PVW, but just this week we're going to be cleaning one day a week the office of Senator Norma Torres, and we're going to be taking the group out there to clean her office. So these are just some examples of what the group situation might look like. Then you have your work program, and this is that quote-unquote segregated program where people are going to work every day and they're working on things that are typically geared around a production floor, might be assembly and packaging, but there's a lot of work programs out there that you need to go out and visit because they really have some pretty sophisticated equipment that people are being trained on. We have L sealers, blister pack machines, we have things that are, we have PVW, we have two of our clients that are actually working on a saw. They're sawing something called corner boards, that are the boards that go into the corners of large cardboard boxes called gaylords, so that if you have a big box of bananas, you can actually double stack a pallet so it doesn't crush on one another. So the things that can be going on in a work program can actually be quite sophisticated. Jobs will vary day to day depending on the needs of the business partners that we contract with in order to bring these jobs into our production facility. For the business partner, they are outsourcing the work to us. We are completing the work on our production floor. Clients, again, are paid under the Section 14C certificate, which is the productivity-based pay. The hours in a job out in the community through supported employment group or supported employment individual placement are going to be determined by the employer. Here, the hours are defined by the program design that's approved by the state of California. So for PVW, folks come in and work from 8 to 3:30 Monday through Friday. It is their full-time job. While work is the primary objective, there are other training activities that take place, and there are times when work is not available 100% of the time, and we've seen a lot of that through this downturn in the economy that's starting to pick back up again. And work programs are funded 100% by the regional center. So these are some examples of some of the work that our clients are doing. I want to mention the one on the top right there, or top left on your side. This is a extruder that was actually placed at our facility by a company called Wacker. They're an international silicone manufacturer. They're based in Germany. And these are earplugs that are being manufactured. And this is a Lazy Susan that's turning around in a circle as the silicone is being cut and dropped onto the Lazy Susan. These guys are picking it up, and they're not just putting it into the package. They're having to do some very sophisticated quality assurance to make sure that there's no debris on the earplugs themselves. So this is just one example of something that's a little bit more sophisticated that you might see going on in a work program. We also have a brand new job from a company here that's local. They're actually in Rancho Cucamonga, although they're a Chinese company that are trying to come and get into some of the places like Walmart with their phone cases for smartphones and iPads, and they've been told you need to manufacture it here in the US. So they've actually brought work back from China, and it's called Trident Case, and we're actually packaging now cases for smartphones, iPads, iPods, and the like. And there's a potential that we're going to be going out with a group to actually work on their site in the near future as well. And then you have your day programs, different from a work program, but many of your day programs may have a work component. So again, it's going to be on-site and or community-based. There's a local program who has a day program where their clients go out and work in Pizza Hut 2 hours a week. And so it's going to be a limited amount of work time, but it is still work and it is still vocational training during that time. The hours of these programs are set by an approved program design, and while work is not the primary objective and a lot of other training things take place, work is and can be available in these program settings too. and adult development centers are fully funded by the regional center. So this is just an example of, in the bottom picture, working on a sponge job that we have where we're packaging grout sponges for a company that are being hung right on the rack at Home Depot. But you also see there's other things that are happening there as far as a training on culture with Hawaiian dancing and also some cooking things that are going on. So this has a variety of things, and it is very staff intensive. In an adult development center, you have one staff member to every 4 clients, and so these are typically people that need a lot more direction or have some other challenges behaviorally or physically. And then you also have something called micro-enterprise, and these are some of the critical elements of micro-enterprise. What this consists of is a client developing his or her own business. And these are some of the things that have to be looked at as far as you need a business plan, you need startup, you need capital. And there's a website here, dds.ca.gov. This is the Department of Developmental Services website. And there's a lot more information on micro-enterprise at this site. But these are some of the things that a sample of a micro-enterprise might be: a computer repair contractor, a personal assistant, somebody going out and filling up vending machines, arts and crafts, word processing, and the such. And so there's an entire PowerPoint presentation on the DDS website that you could go and look at if you want to learn more about the micro-enterprise. So the role of the regional center, guys, is really, really critical. As frustrating as it can be, and I've heard some of the comments about when Carol was saying, you know, what do you think of when you think of regional center? I think you said waiting. Yes, it can be extremely critical. I mean, it can be extremely frustrating, but it is extremely critical because they are the ones that are funding the lion's shares of these opportunities for employment. And so if you're not currently hooked up with the regional center, please go in and get the intake appointment. We have 2 local regional centers. Inland is in San Bernardino. San Gabriel Pomona is right over here in Pomona, and they're going to be moving soon down to Phillips Ranch where the Walmart is. They're actually going to be moving there next March. But if you're not currently connected with regional center, please get that intake appointment and get in there and get yourself with an open case. These are lifelong services, and you do not want to miss out on the opportunity for lifelong services, especially based on some of the things that you've already heard about, all the plans that were in place that just got obliterated when something unexpected happened. So regional center can be frustrating. It can be time-consuming. You do have to wait a long time, but you have to be persistent. And if there's one thing I can leave with you today, it's please be persistent. This is my favorite quote of all time. If you think you're too small to make a difference, you have not been in bed with a mosquito. Be the mosquito. Is there someone in regional center in the room that cut off my mic? So the role of the regional center, you need to talk with your regional center consumer services coordinator, or referred to as the CSC. You need to talk about the services that you're interested in. When I say you, I'm talking about the consumer. If the consumer is conserved, the consumer and the family. If the consumer wants family involvement, all of you together. Talk to that CSC about what it is that they want as far as services. The CSC is then going to refer you to several service providers to go investigate on your own. And you need to take this opportunity to do that. There are over 120 service providers in the state of California. There's a large number here in the Inland Empire. Not every service provider is going to be a good fit for your son or daughter. So go out, tour, see what's going on, look and see what's being offered, look at some of the things that they're doing, and schedule appointments so that you can learn the things that you need to learn. But you need to do it in person. Please don't do it by phone. You need to go out and take a tour. Do an intake appointment. What do you want to look for in a service provider? Well, you want to look for a lot of things. I think a proven track record is extremely important. You want to look at high levels of satisfaction. You want to look at their outcomes. You want to look at the satisfaction that is listed in their outcomes. All of us in the employment world have to be accredited by CARF, the Commission on Accreditation of Rehabilitation Facilities. Within that accreditation, we have to do major outcome reporting. Ask for a copy of that so you can see what kind of success they had or didn't have and what kind of outcomes they were able to achieve. Do they have services that are driven by the consumer, by the person, or is it driven by, no, we have to pigeonhole that person into something that we already have available? Are the case management services being offered individualized? Do they have good rapport with not only their funders, but also the regulatory agencies that they're involved with? Do the staff seem knowledgeable? Are they dedicated? Are they going to go the extra mile for your son or daughter? Is there expertise in reasonable accommodations and adaptive technology? Is there a high priority on safety, a high priority on advocacy? And one of the things that I didn't put on this list that I just realized is not on here is probably the most important. That is there a high priority on fulfilling the choice of the person who is seeking the service? We don't want to get into situations where we say you can have any choice you want as long as it's vanilla. That's not choice. At the same time, we also have to have staff that are in place who can talk to people about risk and responsibility. People, when they're adults, as Carol said, have the ability to make their own decisions. But we as service providers, I feel, have the obligation to sit down and talk about consequences of certain decisions that that person might be making. They may still make that decision, they may still take on that risk, but at least we gave them what's called informed choice. The other thing on this slide that I wanted to mention, that Bob also mentioned, was, are there opportunities for social outlets? I'm going to do a study on this one of these days because it's fascinating to me. On my production floor, we have drama all day long. But when we have a social event, there's no drama. It's amazing. We have dances once a month that our clients can come to. We have an action club that people can be members of. Action Club is actually a chartered club of Kiwanis International for people with disabilities. So you might want to look at the service providers and see if there's other outlets besides just the program day. Are there other things with added value? And when you select a service provider, you're going to have to go through an intake procedure. And this is really important because we cannot start a person without many of the things that you see on this list. There's got to be a current medical and a current psychological. We need information from the regional center. We need their IPP. We need any other plans that were developed if they've been in a program already. We need to see the discharge summary. We need to see what goals they were working on in that other program. We also, in the United States, all of us that are going to work have to have the credentials in order to work in the US. Typically, that's your ID card or driver's license and your Social Security card. Not copies, originals. You need to show those so that the I-9 form can be completed and the service provider will be in compliance with the United States government for the I-9 form. And then I heard some talk before about, well, what is IEP? What is IHP? All of these acronyms typically mean something similar. At PVW, we have in our day programs what's called an ITP, which is Individual Training Plan, but in the work program, it's dictated by the state of California what we have to call it. We even have to use their form, and it is the IHSP, the Individual Habilitation Services Plan. It is the training plan. It is the service plan. And it does fall under that umbrella that Carol was referring to of the IPP, which is the umbrella document that all the services are wrapped up into. Next, you need to go out and do your intake appointment if you've not already been out for a tour. Sometimes when people come out for a tour, a program will have them do an intake appointment at the same time. If that hasn't happened, go out and do your intake appointment. As I said before, for any service provider where a paycheck is earned, you've got to have that credentials, your ID card, Social Security card, birth certificate, again, originals. You need to wait for acceptance decision because every service provider for every program, work or day program, will have entrance criteria that has to be met, and that's different for every program. Work with your service coordinator to arrange transportation, and when you're accepted, start your new program. So there is joy in work. Work brings a lot of fulfillment to our lives. There is no happiness except in the realization that we have accomplished something, as Henry Ford said. I think employment is extremely critical for many of us, whether we have disabilities or not. Not everybody without a disability works. Not everybody with a disability works. So you have to remember that it's going to be individualized and based on what that person wants for their life. So with that, I'll ask if there's any questions, but before I do, let me tell you that this PowerPoint presentation, if you want a copy of it, There's going to be an evaluation form at the end of the day today. Put down on that evaluation form an email address or a physical address, and I will be happy to send you out a copy of what I just showed you today if it would be helpful for you. But with that, let me see if there's any questions that you might have. Yes? This is a huge problem. These are the people that are really falling between the cracks because there are no services that are currently available for them. My suggestion would be to push, again, be the mosquito, push the Department of Rehabilitation to take some more responsibility if you possibly can. That does not always work. And kids that are coming out of school with learning disabilities that are not regional center eligible, that are not work ready, are the ones that are falling between the cracks, unfortunately, and there's not a good solution right now for that, unfortunately. Other questions? Yes? Yeah, and you know, there's a lot of, and I hate to say this because it's not the answer you're going to want to hear, but there's a lot of talk out there about things that need to be developed for this very specific population that have not yet been developed. And I think as Grady said, you know, this is kind of the pioneers coming out of the school system, you know, with the Asperger's and the high levels of autism that are not work ready, and trying to figure out what are we going to do with this particular population that falls between the cracks. And I wish I had a better answer for you. And isn't that true for all of us when we came out of high school? We didn't know what we wanted either. And we did just have to do, you know, some trials of jobs that we just needed to go try and see if it was a good fit for us or not. And I don't think that's any different, with the exception that you've got a population that's not as work ready as a person without a disability might be. And so the supports need to be developed for that to happen. Yeah. Yes, we need one of those. And I will tell you that the funding in the state of California right now is terribly inadequate, even for the established programs that are out there. There is a huge gap between what we need to run the current programs and what the state of California is actually willing to pony up and pay. It's a huge problem right now. And the state of California is not going to be in any better position in the next year or two. It's going to continue to be a struggle because we have such huge things. I mean, we have. Aren't you all happy to know that we're not in recession anymore and we've solved the budget problem? Wow, no we haven't. So this is very frustrating as well. If we don't, there are other service providers that do. We've got folks out in the Riverside area, San Bernardino area, there's service providers out in the Temecula area, up in the high desert. So there's service providers that are available throughout the region that you could actually work with. Absolutely. And your service coordinator can refer you to who those programs are. They're not referring you? Be the mosquito. And if you need help finding those programs, let me know, and I will give you some contact information about how you can contact them directly and then get back to the regional center and say, hey, I found this program out in the city of San Bernardino and I really want to try it out.
Karen, what if they're not regional center approved?
Okay, if you're not regional center eligible, then your only option right now is the Department of Rehab. Yeah. Yes. Many of the service providers can do what we call the direct placement, meaning that we are vendored directly with Department of Rehabilitation to do the direct job placement. But again, remember that there is no long-term funding for that. It is placement, job coaching initially, job coaching cuts off. Group supported employment is something that's only regional center eligible clients, unfortunately. It's initially funded by DOR, but you have to be eligible for the regional center in order to be in group placement. Yeah. If there's one thing that I can leave with you today, it's this. be the mosquito, guys. Be the mosquito. You've got to be the mosquito with Regional Center, and you've got to continue to nip and nip and nip at them until you get what you want. And so the options are out there. Not for everyone, unfortunately. There's still services that need to be developed for those that are non-Regional Center eligible, but there are options for employment out there. Okay?
Thank you. Again, watching you look at all this stuff, and it's not like when we can go out there and apply for a job, get a job, start working on Monday. These things take time. These things take process. And there's a lot of frustration, again, as parents, because we do want to have that word full employment. We want to have competitive employment. We want to have substantial and gainful wages. And there's a lot of different things, and as Karen was alluding to, paychecks. It brings to mind a young man that had gotten a job, and it's coincidentally at the same time, he became eligible for Social Security. Now, the Social Security check was like $650 for him at that situation and that point in time. But it was so amazing to see an individual who was extremely excited and more excited about his $28 check from working than he was that check from Social Security, because it just didn't have that same meaning. It didn't have that impact. He saw and felt the rewards of his employment. And that's where sometimes we get stuck, because we forget to think typical. We forget to think about what it was like when we were 17, 18, 19 years old, either A, having to get our butts kicked to get us out to get a job, but as parents, we become so protective. We want the top of that pyramid right off the get-go. And the same token, as we've had our children who've learned behaviors, we have to a lot of times undo the behaviors, because what have we done? We've gotten used to, as I was talking to one of my friends outside a little bit earlier, we've gotten so used to getting things done in 5 minutes, because when we try to teach them, we don't have 45 minutes to take that time to teach and train anymore, because we're always in a hurry just trying to get stuff done. And I know I don't want to spend 45 minutes cleaning things up when I could have kept it clean for 5 minutes. And so we have to sometimes be willing to let those things go and let those challenges be handled, so that they have that ability to develop into who they get to become next. And believe me, again, for our non-regional center families in here, it is, I think, very difficult. Our families with kids with Asperger's, I think it's very, very difficult, because there is a slippage through the cracks right now that honestly I don't know how to fix. But again, with the Lanterman Act, with the regional center system, what did it start out with? 12 families that really pushed that button in the state of California. And so the harder we push, the more we have the ability, and it only takes one to really try to make that difference. And I just wish there was a lot easier answers than there are out there sometimes. But it's a system that's just, it's not as patient as we want it to be, because we want some answers, we want some solutions. And some of our kids are just falling through the cracks right now. There's just not good, solid answers.
So there's one other thing that I would like to remind you guys of. A parent has got a lot more clout with our state legislature than I do as a service provider, because when I go and talk to them, it's self-serving because of my business. You as parents have a lot more clout, and I would really encourage you to get to know your local legislators, especially those of you who don't have anything right now because they're not regional center eligible. Get out there and tell your stories. Crying is very effective. But tell your stories, because they need to hear what's going on. Nobody's going to make the change unless it's you guys. Lanterman Act was only created because there was a group of parents who decided that when they couldn't get the ear of Lanterman, they waited until he went to the Senate Hotel across the street where he was actually staying back then, and would wait for him to get on the elevator, and got on with him and trapped him until he got so sick and tired of it that he finally agreed to go out and look at a state institution. And at that time was just totally blown away by what he saw and said, we have to do something about this. So that's what it takes, guys, and the parents are the ones who are going to do it. It's not the service providers. It's not the regional centers. It's the parents. So if I can leave you with something today, it's just to give you a little rah-rah and let you know that you guys are the ones that are critical for making changes in the system.
Thank you.